Hi, everyone. I'm James Enriquez.
And I'm James Credo.
And we are so excited to have the wonderful Dr. Diane Milliken Garza, Director of the Rio Grande Valley Philanthropic Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
We're so glad you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about the foundation, what it is, the history of it, and your involvement in it?
Yes, well, we started as the Brownsville Community Foundation, and the Rio Grande Valley Philanthropic Foundation is also a community foundation. But we've expanded to cover the whole region now. But in Brownsville, we've been around since 1976. So we have a long history of being a community foundation and working for our local community, doing service to the nonprofits and to other benefits that our community might need over time.
So that's interesting. Help us understand, when you say service to other nonprofits, a foundation is a nonprofit.
Exactly. Yes. A community foundation is considered a public charity under the IRS. And because of that, we're allowed to take in funds that would then be distributed back into the community at exceptional tax exemption benefits for the donors.
Okay. So how do you determine how you distribute that money?
Well, it depends on the fund. We do have some discretionary funds that we were given through different means, donors, during the course of the organization's lifespan. So we can do initiatives, which we do with our own funds. But generally, that's very unusual for a community foundation. Most community foundations have no discretionary money, and the only funds they have are usually donor advised funds. You can also have scholarship funds. You can also have designated funds. There's a lot of funds that fall under the IRS's public charity funds that we're allowed to hold and use for income tax exemption when it's going to be donated back into the community.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the topic of donor advised funds. That's how we met you. You got us. You helped us start our Strategic Insights Financial Planning Donor Advised Fund, and we're super excited about that.
So excited to have you.
Thanks, James. How did we come to that conclusion that we wanted to open a donor advised fund, and what is it?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time we've been, contributing to different nonprofits in the valley. And we just wanted an efficient way. Well, we wanted to keep it local too, so we researched different donor advised funds that we could use. And at the beginning of our research, we saw large corporations that can hold donor advised funds.
Which, if I can interrupt you, that's kind of new.
Yeah.
Because donor advised funds originally started with community foundations, and I feel honestly that that's where they belong. Because in that kind of a foundation, you're in general taking in funds from the people that live there and giving them back out to the needs of the people that live there. If you're doing a donor advised fund through a major organization that's sort of using them for their own use, for their own benefit in a way, you're not really going to benefit your local community.
Right. We were pleasantly surprised. James Enriquez actually did the research that, and we found your foundation, and we thought, we want to keep everything local, and so we were excited to talk to you and actually get it started.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think is important for people to realize is it doesn't have to be just an individual. It can be a business fund.
Yeah.
Because in our day of philanthropy, businesses, well, everybody wants to do their own philanthropy. Gone are the days, I think, where your boss just takes some money out of your paycheck and you don't say where it goes or any interest that you might have is not addressed. It's just, given to wherever they want to give it. I think now businesses want to do their own philanthropy rather than just paying taxes. And local needs are important to people that live and have their businesses in a community.
How did y'all make the decision to having a donor advised funds versus just going out to the community and accepting donations in different kinds of forms.
Well, it's traditional for a community foundation to hold the donor advised funds. And when you do that, the donor gets exceptional benefits.
Right.
I know there's a really good example that the National Philanthropic Trust puts out on their website that is, for instance, if you have, also as a community foundation, we can accept avenues of donation, avenues of funds that just the working nonprofit would not be able to accept.
Right.
So, for instance, if you're a donor and you have $100,000 worth of stock, and you've decided, you know what, I'm going to sell that stock and I'm going to give that money to various needy nonprofits in my city. So if you do that and say you come up with $30,000 that you have to pay taxes on because you sold the $100,000 worth of stock, and so then it would leave you with $70,000 to give away as a donor. But if you give that same amount of unsold stock to the community foundation, then we can sell it ourselves for whatever we can get for it, but you will get the full credit of the $100,000 without the tax payment that you would have to do on your own.
Are you finding, James, that people are aware of donor advised funds, and are they looking to contribute to those vehicles, or are they just giving money directly to nonprofits?
Yeah, I've seen it all across the board.
Wow.
So, and what I mean by that is there's plenty of people where the first time they hear of it is through me when I bring it up to them.
Yeah.
And then after I bring it up, it just recently happened in the last couple of weeks. After I bring it up, they say, oh yeah, such and such nonprofit sent me a letter, told me I can start a DAF through them. DAF is short for donor advised fund. So there's an awareness, but I don't think they're fully comprehending the entire strategy.
Right.
No, because when you get an example like that, because there are universities, that's what comes to my mind right away, that are sending that out and they're holding DAFs. They are allowed to do that. But it might as well be a designated fund, because they're not going to be giving away your donation to whoever you advise. They're only giving it away to themselves. And, if that's who you want to donate to, then just donate to them. But if you want a choice on where different grants can go, because your funds don't have to be given away at one time, there's not even a time limit on when they have to be given away, and your philanthropic interest may change over time, and you have the option to give your funds to different nonprofits.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the alternative ways of giving other than just cash, because that's one of the things that we talk to clients a lot about. So we'll say something like, hey, donate $100,000 to this DAF, or donate $100,000 of stock to this organization. And they say, well, this organization's small. I don't know that they can receive that kind of donation.
Right.
Is that what you're saying, that through the donor advised fund, they'd be able to do that?
Yes. Okay. And we can accept the unsold stock and a lot of other things that we can accept too, that just your everyday nonprofit would not be able to do that. And not only that, but they would not be under the IRS able to give the same exemptions. Like, for instance, if you have a client that you realize, we're going to have a lot of taxes to pay, and our deadline for taxes is in a week. Well, you could start a donor advised fund or put money into a donor advised fund and not pay those taxes right up to the day of the deadline. Because it's not like you're doing anything that's going to take away from where the money would go for taxes anyway. The money will go back into the social system. It's just that you will get credit for it as an individual or a business, and you will have a say to where those funds go. And you don't have to do it right away. Okay. Like, they can say, okay, Wednesday is my tax deadline, and I had such a great year this year, so I have, $100,000 that I was going to have to pay in taxes.
Right.
But you can open your donor advised fund, and then you have unlimited time to use it. It is irrevocable, so you can't give it to the foundation and then say, no, we're going to take it back and do something else with it. Once you give it, it's irrevocable. But that's because you're able to take that tax exemption immediately, and you're given that immediately.
So it's an immediate tax deduction.
Immediate.
And that's a question that we get from clients is, we don't have to make a decision right away. You should have unlimited time.
To where the grant goes. Yes.
It's irrevocable, but your money's still there.
Yeah.
Right.
And you wouldn't be keeping that money anyway.
Uh-huh.
So that would be tax money that you would have to pay.
Right.
So, and if you're selling stock, part of it you would have to pay. So sometimes I think people are there. It's very advantageous to go to wealth advisors to see, okay, look, I'm going to have to pay this amount of taxes. Where can I get it from?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might have cash and you might have this, you might have that. But if you look at the best way, for instance, the stock, so you don't have to pay any taxes from that. You can donate that and get the full credit. Whereas you might already have some cash, but it might not be the best way to spend it.
Right.
Because you don't get the same credit for it. So you don't have as much money to give away.
One of the greatest things I've ever heard around charitable giving is let's move your giving to your balance sheet rather than your income statement.
That's a very good point.
Yes, I love that statement.
Yeah. I think you might have to explain it, but I feel like everybody would be for that. Everybody.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is you can give charitably through your income, but it might be more tax efficient to give property. So long-term capital gain property, because then you avoid the taxes on the capital gain.
Exactly. In fact, there's so many avenues that people can give that way. Some of them are even based on your age. Like when you reach 70, I know you can donate directly into the nonprofit, well, into the foundation,
Right.
and take a really great tax advantage at that time. There's a lot of avenues that are available to you if you go through a public charity like a community foundation.
You are singing music to my ears. You talked about qualified charitable distributions, which we love to talk about. QCDs cannot go to a DAF. Qualified charitable distributions cannot go to a donor advised fund.
Right.
But so what you're saying is I can actually make a donation to the foundation and to a donor advised fund through you separately.
Separately. Exactly.
Yeah.
We've had that come up several times. I was going to say many times, but really several times, where the law is that you can make a donation tax-free if you have no control over it. So if you put it in a donor advised fund, you would have some sort of control over it. Right. So you have to give it directly to the foundation. But if you do that and you're already involved with the foundation, you know where our priorities lie. So even though legal, you can't say, please write a check out of my fund for such and such a nonprofit, you know where our initiatives are and where our priorities are, and you still get those tax incentives.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a question that we get from clients all the time once we talk to them about a DAF is, how do I know if I tell them to send it to this nonprofit that they're going to okay it? You know? Yeah.
Well, by law, the board of directors of the foundation do have to vote on whatever it is that the donor wants to give their money to, or even depositing money. But the rules are clear. It's like it has to go to a 501. So, in some cases, a university or a school will be considered a 501, even though they're not exactly. But in general, it has to go to a 501. And the reason is because it's tax exempt money that you're using. But yeah.
Right. Do your donors kind of meet with you first and say, hey, I would like to make a donation, and these are the nonprofits that I'm thinking of, just to get an okay ahead of time?
Yeah. And then we do have to vote on that, but it's like if they meet the qualifications, and it's a really good thing too, because we're doing the due diligence for the person, because this did come up recently where there was a nonprofit. It is a 501, but I just happen to have personal knowledge of exactly what they did. And so the person that wanted to donate to them, it looked like everything was fine, except for that I just personally knew that if you did your due diligence, you might be able to find out that they really weren't doing what he thought they were doing.
I see.
And so at least you as the foundation can do the due diligence for your donors and say, no, well, they don't, that's not what they do in that nonprofit. If you want to give it for a different reason, it is a 501. It is in good standing with the IRS because we do check on all of that.
Right.
And then it may be down the road that they want to give that check
Right.
to the same nonprofit or some other nonprofit. We can also give them suggestions, like if they just don't really know, or if they have a fondness for some nonprofit, but it's not really a nonprofit.
Right.
It's really just a fund organization. Well, that's not going to count because the federal government doesn't allow that. But there are ways to where you can supplement, where your interests do lie, your philanthropic interests do lie in a community.
Right.
Hey, going backwards, we probably should have done this sooner. But what is a donor advised fund? How does it work?
Well, it's in our foundation, and it's pretty typical. There's a minimum of $5,000 to start, and then a donor would sign an agreement with us, and then their money would be put into some financial group that is able to hold those funds and reinvest those funds. So however amount they eventually have accrued in their donor advised fund is earning money all the time. And with our foundation, our discretionary money is earning money. And the reason that's important is because it brings in more to give away.
Right.
So it can start as low as $5,000 and go as high as you might want to put into it. Then you name it as the donor, and it could be a business or an individual or a family, because we do have a lot of family funds. It can be a memorial fund. It could also be like a designated fund that's just for one entity, but it's not exactly the same as a donor advised fund. It's close, but not. It just, all of it goes to that one designated area. But in general donor advised fund, any area that is a 501, it does not have to be in your immediate community. We love the idea that it usually is, because then we build our community through the foundation, but it doesn't have to be. So like, for instance, if you put money in your fund, say you have a family fund, but you have family that lives in the upper part of the United States, and there's a charity there that you're familiar with because maybe you grew up there or whatever, you can give that to any 501, your funding to any 501 anywhere. And that's something that our board always votes yes for, as long as the nonprofit is in good standing with the IRS.
James, a question I got regarding DAFs this week, is my money invested specific to me, or it's for the foundation?
That's a good question. It's a question I was going to ask you. Because you mentioned that it can be invested.
Yeah, it is by the individual fund. It does kind of all go into the same pot in a way, but when you look at what your statement is and what you have to work with as a fund holder, it's completely individual to you. And your statement will come out with exactly what your funds were invested in and how much they earned or they lost, whatever, exactly like it would be if you just invested it on your own.
Right.
And then it might grow to where you start out with, $10,000 in your fund and you end up with $12,000 or $15,000 or $100,000.
Are there any restrictions to the investments in a donor advised fund?
No, not at this time, no. I mean, from time to time things change, but not at this time.
Right.
Who's the one making the investment decision? Is it the donor? Is it the financial advisor? Or is it the board of directors of the community foundation?
It's pretty much the financial advisor and holder of the funds. If they're two separate things, that I don't know how that would work, because they kind of have to work together. Because we don't get involved in that. I do know that there are some very, very large community foundations that do allow a donor to advise the way their fund is invested, but we've never had that come up, and it would be a complicated thing to do. Right now, everybody gets advised the same way through the same holders of the funds. We'll now be having more than one fund holder, but and and people can choose which one they would want.
When you say fund holder, you mean
Custodian of the funds.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So even though you're putting in money to a foundation, you can still name it any.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
like the John Smith Family
Right,
Fund,
right.
the John Smith Memorial Fund.
Yeah.
The whatever your business name is fund. Whatever you want to name it, you can name it, and you get your own checkbook.
Yeah.
That's written out so that when a grant is sent, it's obviously from your fund. We send a letter that accompanies the check, explaining it's through this community foundation, but it's from the family fund or whatever of this particular fund holder, and then we'll get a letter back usually because there won't be a separate individual. They can't contact you.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted them to.
I feel like when we mention that to clients, because at first they hear foundation, large organization, but when they hear it, you can still name it whatever they want. It gets them really interested, and it's a local foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's different than a private foundation because a private foundation is like one entity,
Right.
and a community foundation or a public charity like we are is made up of funds.
Yeah.
So like their fund is a fund in this whole organization, whereas a private foundation, it's one fund, one everything.
I see.
If they give money to a private foundation, their name wouldn't be on anything except for a thank you note, and they would have no ability to advise
Gotcha.
where the money went.
Yeah, I like the fact that you said family fund, because we tell a lot of clients, like, you can name it the Enriquez Family Fund.
Right.
Get the whole family involved, get your little kiddos.
100%.
Yeah, have family board meetings to decide where your charitable contributions
And
are.
we can send them information about who, like whatever vicinity they might be interested in, even if it's the whole Rio Grande Valley, who are the nonprofits that are there and what do they do. And I know, most people do not know the extent of the importance of our local nonprofits and what they really do and how our communities would be changed if we didn't have them. And I think when you start seeing that, it makes giving to your local community a priority for a lot of people. Because I think it's easy to think, oh, the Red Cross, like it was on the news, or the Warriors and all of those kind of things that are really good, but they're far, far away from us in most respects. But if you do the Red Cross of the Rio Grande Valley or the Red Cross of Brownsville or McAllen or Harlingen, it's a whole different story.
As James mentioned, there's other organizations that have donor advised funds. So what should people be looking for when they're trying to pick where they're going to open their donor advised fund?
Well, I feel that you need to look in your own community and try to support your own community. I honestly, this is my personal opinion. I have no knowledge to back it up. It's just my personal opinion. I don't feel like that's going to stay part of our legal system forever, that these huge companies can hold donor advised funds. Because I feel like the reason they were even created was for the sake of community groups and serving the local community, which is what a community foundation like ours does as a public charity. And to turn it into these monumental fund holding groups, that are national and international, I think sort of defeats the purpose. If you put your donor advised fund there, how do they know anything about your everyday life and what's needed in the community where you live your everyday life? And I feel like we're bound by the same government restrictions, the same legalities. No one has to worry what might happen to their money because it's all, run through the IRS. We have a yearly audit, all of those things that you would be getting with some international or national group we have here to safeguard your money. But the benefit is just so great because it's in our everyday life. It's what we depend on. It's the fabric of everything that is quality of life for, in our case, the Rio Grande Valley and the southern border. And no one knows what we need except for us.
Yeah, that was a big reason why we chose to open our DAF with with the Rio Grande Valley Philanthropic Foundation. I know some of the other things that we considered that maybe you viewers want to consider are the fees, because the community foundation charges a fee, so does the financial institution. Investments choices, because I know some DAFs, they have just a set menu of funds, while others are just open architect.
Yeah.
So I think those are some things that they should consider.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, and the fees, because there is nothing else supported except for the funds for our local organization, the fees are very low. They're very fair, and not hardly just enough to carry on the day-to-day work is ever charged. So much, almost all of your philanthropic giving goes directly back to the community. And even if you want to say the small part that comes out to pay for the operation of the foundation, that is in the benefit of the local community.
Yeah, I never thought about it the way you mentioned earlier about the due diligence, because I was just imagining a scenario where if I decided to not open a DAF and just contribute directly to a nonprofit organization, I'm more than likely not going to go to the IRS's
Page.
right.
No, you're not.
Right.
It's not bookmarked on.
Mine, yes.
But there's thousands and thousands and thousands
Right.
on there.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're not going to, and you're not going to know the information about their everyday activities and who's still really strong and who's going to close their doors tomorrow. But those things it's our business to know those things. And then it just makes your giving that much safer.
The fact that for many years now, we've been talking to clients about charitable gifting, but just recently we've been talking more about donor advised funds specifically. And one of the biggest reasons is because the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act increased the standard deduction, where a lot fewer people are itemizing, and you must itemize to be able to get take a charitable contribution deduction.
Yeah.
Right.
So we talked to clients about DAFs as a way to lump their charitable contributions into 1 year. So for example, let's say you give $10,000 a year to a charity. Well, you know what? Let's put $30,000 into a DAF, 3 years of charitable contributions.
Right.
And then to your point, you don't have to give all that money in year one. You can
And it's earning money.
right. Yeah, and you pick a good investment, and
Yeah. Yeah.
With that being said, have you seen an uptick in donor advised funds in the recent past?
Yeah, we have locally, but I don't know what to charge that with, but I do know about that you have to itemize, and that I think some people just feel like it's easier to not do the donor advised fund, but you're missing out on, number one, the exemptions that you could get, because you can be, if you have good advisors, it's amazing how creative you can be and get some really good advantages. The reason that's important to me is because it makes more money that they can donate that we can then serve the community with. And I feel like anybody that is leaning toward any kind of philanthropic donation, that's important to them. They don't want to pay it in taxes. They don't want to waste it. They would much rather give it to a charitable cause.
Right.
Well, thank you for tuning in to our 2 cents on your dollars. Thank you, James, for being here. More importantly, thank you, Dr. Garza, for being here. We really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. For more content, please follow and subscribe.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to effect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.